Well, thank you, Nancy, and thank you to all of you for coming out tonight. And it's just absolutely wonderful. I just live right down the road here on Stafford Road, so it's not a difficult time to come over here. And so I got very excited about the book that Lake Oswego is reading this year, and had a fun time going through it. And so what I wanted to do was ask the question, um, based on this book, could Ba and Ma and Lucy and Sam have lived in Oregon? Because this is all about the gold rush and Chinese ancestry people dealing with all of this. And if yes, where in Oregon would they have lived? And based on the book that maybe some of you have read. And so that's the whole reason why we're here tonight. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to have two parts to the whole thing. And that number one is I want to teach you a little bit about the geology of Oregon. So I have to get you to understand what this unbelievable state is like geologically. And then based on that, what is the geological history related to gold mining? And we have had 2 or 3 or 4 major gold mining strikes in the past, but not here in this area. So where is it based on the geology? And so we're going to do that as we go around the state. Now, I grew up here. I grew up in Beaverton, went to Beaverton High School, 6th-generation Oregonian, and then college and teaching took me around the world. This is my 52nd year of teaching. And so I taught for 20 years in Switzerland, New Zealand, Washington, Colorado, and Louisiana. And I came back here. Now, in high school, I was interested in 3 things: sports, and camping and girls. And that was about it. And my family never traveled. I'd never been to Eastern Oregon, never been to Southern Oregon, never been to Crater Lake or the Wallowas or the Steens, any place. We just went to the beach. I came back here with the eyes of a geologist, and we traveled. I took my family all over the state camping. I kept on saying, holy mackerel, this is an unbelievable wonderland of geology, and wherever you go, there's a different story that is here. And so what I'm going to do is take you around Oregon and show you the different parts of the state that we have and the geology we have here. And good evening.
Good evening.
My nephew decides to come. Whoa.
Front row.
Yeah, front row. And so what I'm hoping is it will tweak your idea. Hey, I got to go see this area, because there's a little story that is there. And then as we're going along, we can talk about where gold mining may have occurred. And then in the end, I'll tell you about the $9 billion worth of gold that has been taken out of the ground since that time. So that's what we're going to be doing. So if we take a look at the state of Oregon, here's a shaded relief map of the state. You can see that there is quite a variability. If we lived in Kansas, it would be flat, nothing exciting. But here you've got up here, you've got the Wallowas, and then also the Blue Mountains. Down here we got the Owyhee, which I'll be talking about. You've got the high desert from Burns up to Bend. You've got the Umatilla Plain up there. You've got the Cascades, definitely up and down. You got the Willamette Valley that we happen to be in. And then also you've got the Coast Range and then the Klamath Mountains. And so it's all different. And each one has a story. And so to kind of summarize that, Blue Mountain, I'm going to take you around the state. I'm going to start out in the Blue Mountains because those are the oldest rocks that we have in the state of Oregon. Then we're going to go down to the Klamath Mountains. Those are the second oldest rocks that we have got. Then we're going to come over to the Basin and Range, where you have all of the valleys facing north and south. Then out to the Owyhee. Where did that name come from? Well, the original settlers were from Hawaii. They couldn't spell. And so this is how it came out. And then we'll talk about the high lava plains. Then we'll talk about the Deschutes Umatilla Plateau up there. Then the Cascades, then the Willamette Valley, the Gorge, and then end up at the coast. And then as we are going along, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the gold mining, but at the end, I'll kind of summarize all of that. So that's what we're going to do. So to begin with, here we are in North America, and we are moving in North America at about 2 centimeters a year in that direction, because wherever you are on the face of the earth, you are moving. because magma is coming up to the surface and causing plates to move in this direction. And then when two plates run into one another, one is subducted down underneath the other, and then it melts and comes back to the surface as a chain of volcanoes that you have got. And so there are areas where we divergent margin and convergent margins, and then other places where the plates are just passing by one another. And so that's the big picture that we have got there. If we go back 150 million years, there was no Oregon. We were all underneath water. And so, but we had a plate off of the coast called the Farallon plate that was going underneath us and coming down, melting and coming back to the surface as a chain of volcanoes. You can see going right up through Idaho and then up across Washington. But now and then there would be a big complex of islands or a part of a continent that they couldn't be subducted. It could not go down, and it got stuck on. That's what we call accretion. And we call it accreted terrain that is stuck on in each one of those particular cases like that. And basically the whole state of Oregon in the last 150 million years is accreted terrain. Everything's stuck on. Now, we add a little frosting on the top of the cake, and that is volcanic eruptions. And there's a lot of lava that is up on top of that in different places. But it's still out in the Wallowas, the Blue Mountains, and the Klamath Mountains. These are original accreted terrains, as you can see here, are all are sticking out. But in general, you have the Wallowa terrains, and then you have, now, sometimes when you have subduction occurring on the edge of the continent, it will melt the crust and magma will come up, but it won't make it to the surface, and then it forms what we call a pluton, a granitic pluton. That is where you go to find all of the valuable gold, copper, lead, zinc, and things like that. And so those are very, very important. And so these are the name Silesia. That is all Columbia River basalt. I mean, it's basalt that is there. And all of these other names for the other, what we call accreted terrains. And so if you look at North America, all of Western North America, California, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, and most of Alaska are all stuck on in the last 150 million years. And then also Kamchatka and then Southeast Asia that you have there. So today, off of the coast that you can see of Oregon, we have a chain of volcanoes about a couple 100 miles off of the coast. And they're erupting periodically. And then as magma comes out, they push the plate towards North America. And it's moving 4.5 centimeters a year. That's as fast as your fingernail grows. So it's not moving real fast. It's coming in this direction here, and then it is being subducted underneath North America, and then melting and coming back to the surface as a chain of volcanoes all the way from Mount Lassen down in California, all the way up to Mount Garibaldi up in British Columbia. They're all active volcanoes of the Cascades as we know it. And you can see that you have this plate that is being subducted underneath, and that really causes all of our big earthquakes that we have and the volcanoes, the active volcanoes that we have got here in the Pacific Northwest. So what I'm going to do now is start our little travel around the state. And let's go off to the Pacific, the northeast part of the state, the Wallowa Mountains. And so here we are on the moraine, Wallowa Lake, looking up into the absolutely beautiful Wallowa Mountains. And I still remember in the early 90s, I had a graduate student come to Portland State from Scotland. And he said, I want to study alpine soils, soils above tree line. That was one of my specialties in those days. And I said, he said, I want to do an area that nobody studied. I said, we're off to the Wallowas. We just had to climb every one of the mountains up there and sample all of the soils, and it was absolutely beautiful. Going up to the top of the mountains, looking down, there is Wallowa Lake. You'll see this big, huge area here. That is a glacial moraine, because during the last ice age, that whole valley was filled with ice, and it came out and deposited all of the material that was carried on the ice and in the ice down there and created that moraine, damming it up, and then you have the beautiful Wallowa Lake. And when you get up into the middle of the Wallowas, you have the Eagle Cap Wilderness area. And it's absolutely beautiful to go up into that area, get away from the rest of the world, and it's wonderful. Now, everybody has a favorite mountain. And if I ask each one of you, what's your favorite mountain in Oregon? Some of you would say Mount Hood. Some people would say the Sisters, other places. But mine is in the Wallowas, and it's the Matterhorn. And a lot of you said, Matterhorn? I thought that was Switzerland. Well, Oregon has a Matterhorn. It's a mountain of complete pure marble. It was uplifted, metamorphosed limestone, and it created this unbelievable white mountain. And it is unbelievably neat to get all the way to the top of that, and you can see for miles and miles. So that's my favorite mountain in Oregon. It's not volcanic. It's very, very old rock that was at the bottom of the ocean. And if you just go off the back side of there, you have also the deepest canyon in North America. It's deeper than the Grand Canyon, Hell's Canyon. The Snake River is cut through that. Very, very old rocks that are there. And then up towards the top, you've got some of the basalts. And then as you go down towards La Grande, just south of La Grande, you have Sumter. And that whole area down in there was a big mining area. Why? Because there are lots of granite plutons out in the Wallowas and the Blue Mountains. And so this is one of the three major areas where we had gold mining. And you go through the Sumter Valley, and I'll come back to that a little while later. They still have a lot of the equipment that was associated with the gold mining there. So that is one of the places in Oregon. Now, if you're just interested in geology out there, the oldest rocks are in the state, and we have ammonites out there. I mean, the rest of the state, its fossils are very, very young. These are over 400 million year old fossils that are out there, the oldest rocks that we have there. Now, you go to the southwestern end of the Blue Mountains, you have the results of very, very violent eruptions in the southern part of the John Day fossil beds, the Painted Hills of Oregon. First time I saw that, my holy mackerel, what created those? Well, I also am a specialist in soils. Each one of those red zones is a B horizon of an old forest, because back when these volcanoes were erupting, there were no cascades, and so Eastern Oregon was just as wet as Western Oregon. And you had all these ginkgo trees out there, and you just mobilized all of the iron in those soils, and it got deposited in a zone called the B horizon, and that's what you've got. Then you have another volcanic eruption on top of it, and then that's a light zone, and then it will develop its B horizon. So Greg Ritalik, a professor down at University of Oregon, is the guy that put this story together, and it's just absolutely wonderful. And out in these areas, you have incredible fossils that we find out there in the John Day fossil beds. The father of Oregon geology was a minister up in the Dalles, and he is the guy that spent most of his time instead of reading the Bible, he was out digging fossils up, and then eventually became the first geology professor in Oregon at the University of Oregon. But fossils are found huge numbers in those areas. Also, the Blue Mountains at the western end are the home of our state rock, and that is the Thunder Egg. And you can see what it is. It's basically a void that is in very, very volcanic sediments, of very, very silica. You have a lot of water going down through the system. Why? Because there are no cascades, and it completely dissolves a lot of the silica or quartz, and then it's redeposited in the void, and it has these incredible shapes and forms that you got. And this one actually had a little fault down the middle and some sand coming in addition, but the Thunder Egg is our state rock. And what you do is you go out to Richardson Rock Ranch, which I think has a new name out there just outside of Madras, and they go out and dig holes down into these deposits out there, and you just go out and dig the things out. Here is my son, Doug. He cost me $85 one day. We went out there, and he got it. Oh my God, there's another one. He dug another one, and he put it in the bucket. And then they weigh it at the end. Holy moly, that's going to be expensive. But it was fun. So those are the Northeast Oregon, and especially over towards La Grande and that area. That's where a lot of the mining was. So now let's go down to Southwest Oregon. And so here's the Klamath Mountains, and here is just outside of Medford. This is Table Rock. Now, you're not going to find anything in that. That's all basalt. Basalt just doesn't have a lot of valuable minerals, and that's what up there. But if you go down and back of me into the heart of the Klamath Mountains, you have lots and lots of areas where you've got accreted terrain there, lots of plutons, and that was the very, very first gold strikes that we have got. Also, this whole area of the state, you've got the Rogue River that goes through there, and you've got the Umpqua River. Both of those were there before the mountains were uplifted. They were what we call antecedent streams, just like the Columbia River. It was there before the Cascades uplifted. And so as the mountains uplifted, they just downcut, and they cut right across the mountain ranges that you've got going out there. So great rafting up and down this one here. And one of our national monuments, and this is the Oregon Caves National Monuments. Now, when you find beautiful stalactites and stalagmites and flow stones like you've got in this particular one, Mother Nature is shouting out to you. That's limestone. But this is a very unique one because it was a limestone, but it was put under heat and pressure, converting it into marble. So this is a cave that actually is formed in marble, not in limestone. And it's in that area right next to some of these granitic plutons that have the gold, copper, lead, and zinc that we'll be talking about in a second. So I'm going to come back to this area in a little while. Let's go out to the southwest part of the state. And this is the Basin and Range Province, and it's connected to Nevada and Utah. And if you go from California all the way to the other end of Utah, if you go from west to east, you go up over a mountain range, down into a valley, up over a mountain range, down into a valley. Every time you go up and down, you're going across a fault. And each one of the valleys is called a graben. It's going down, and the mountains are going up, and they're called horse. So you're horse graben as you're going across. And so all of our mountain ranges in southern Oregon go north and south. And not many valuable gold, copper, lead, zinc that you find there. Here are the Steen Mountains that you see down here. And then anytime you see it like a straight line going there, Mother Nature is shouting out to you, fault. That whole thing is being uplifted. And then here's another area down here. Again, all those mountains are coming up, primarily basalt that you have got, and so not a good source for the gold. And then you have got the Abert Rim, which is just south of Paisley. That you have got, and it's huge. I mean, it is 2,000 feet from the bottom up to the top, major fault going up. But again, not good. They're not, no granite, no plutons for the gold, copper, lead, and zinc. You go up to the top of the Steen Mountains. I still remember the first time getting up to the top of it. And you go down and you look and see these incredible U-shaped valleys. This one is a little Blitzen Gorge. Right next to it, you have got the Kiger Gorge. Look at that. Geologists love it when you don't have a lot of trees around. You can see the actual landforms there, and that is a glacially formed valley that was completely filled with ice during the last glacial period, smoothed it out, takes a V-shaped stream and turns it into a U-shaped valley that you have got. But again, not good rock for gold, but great for glaciers and study of glaciers, and just absolutely beautiful out there. And then you go a little further down to the southwest, we have a desert. And I have students that we just take up the gorge up to Hood River and then the Dalles. They say, whoa, is this the same state of Oregon? It's dry up here. Well, you can continue out to the Alvord Desert. You got playas out there and dried up lake beds that you have got. And you can see right off in the middle, that big crater over there, that thing is loaded with cadmium. And cadmium is kind of important for making batteries. And so this is one of our new natural sources. So for mining, that's there. But is it gold? No, which was our main object tonight. But it's a new finding that just came out this past year that we have got. So we have an incredible desert out here. And actually, just right around the corner here, we actually have a little geyser. And periodically, it'll just squirt off. And we had one of our students at Portland State did a master's thesis on that. And then we go to the extreme southeastern part of the state. We end up in the Owyhee. And all of the rocks that you see there are all volcanic and explosive volcanics. We're talking gigantic caldera eruptions and just very explosive that you have got. And most of it is, a lot of it is rhyolite, which is a rock that is created with a lot of silica in that. And then you got a nice river, the Owyhee River, running through it. But here's an even better picture, looking down off of the Owyhee Plateau into the river there. And if any of you are into rafting, it's a great one, May and June. If you have a good snow melt the year before, you'll have 2 months that you can actually run the river. And Oregon Field Guide did a whole thing of just a few years ago about rafting down this, and it is absolutely beautiful. But it's showing you incredible explosive eruptions in the past, and then all these landslides that occur along here. And here's a picture going down the Owyhee as you're going down the gorge, and it is eventually the Owyhee will feed into the Snake River. And so that is an area, again, not a good source of gold, but it's one of the leading places in the United States for two other minerals. Number one, mercury. A large amount of mercury, and that's associated with the very violent volcanic eruptions. And number two, kitty litter. And you have the right clays that are out there that you heat up, and that makes absolutely beautiful kitty litter that we have out there. All right, and now let's just go up into that high desert from Bend out to Burns. And it's a series of volcanoes that are up there. The oldest ones down near Burns, 10 million years old, and then the youngest ones, this is, the next one is Newberry Crater, which is right next to Bend. One of my favorite places in the state is Fort Rock. And this was a volcano in that area that exploded into a lake. And this was during the glacial periods. 2.8 million years ago until 25,000 years ago. Though we had glaciers growing, and then a lot of the water that was coming from the melting of the glaciers went into the valleys, and they had no connection to the ocean. And so they just filled it up and formed a lake called a pluvial lake. And so there was a large pluvial lake that was here, and then they had a volcanic eruption into the middle of the lake. And so it's very explosive. It goes straight up, and it comes back down and forms what we call a tuff range, a tuff ring, Tuff. So silica-rich, quartz-rich type of magma that you have got. But the dominant winds in the lake were all from the south, and so the southern part never developed. If you look right here, you'll see a little notch. And there's a cave there that Native Americans actually lived in, and they left a whole bunch of sandals. And this is one of the oldest archaeological sites that we have in the state of Oregon, found in that particular area there. I think it should be a national monument. It's just a state park that we have. But then we go up into, again, we're in the high desert. You go up to the top of Paulina Peak. Here is a picture from the top of it looking down on Paulina Lake. There are two lakes in that crater. It was an old, what we call shield volcano, but each one of those volcanoes starts out with basalt and layer upon layer of lava, and at the end, very explosive. And the explosive one will create large craters, and that's where this lake was created. But right next to it, so there's East Lake and Paulina Lake, and there's a huge flow that oozed out, very silica-rich sediment that came out after that, and it solidified very, very fast and formed obsidian. And so here, as you're walking up to that, and this is our last volcanic eruption in Oregon, one of the 2,000 years old. That's how old it is. And you can see obsidian everywhere. They have signs all over there. Geologists, keep your hands in your pocket. Do not take any of this obsidian. So I've been mostly a good boy when I visited up there. And then off of Paulina Peak also, we have lava caves. And so when the lava comes out, it forms a crust over the top, and then the magma just continues to go out underneath it. And then when it goes out at the end and it stops coming out, you have a cave. We have 8 caves, for instance, up on Mount St. Helens from a basalt flow. This is one of the best ones in the state of Oregon. Also in that area there, we also have another one of these Maar volcanoes, M-A-A-R. So when I showed you earlier the Tuff Ring at Fort Rock, that was a volcano that erupted into a lake. This is called Hole in the Ground. And so when you go from Bend out towards Christmas Valley, just along the road, there'll be a big sign that says Hole in the Ground to the right. Well, next time, take it. And you'll come out and you'll see a big hole in the ground. And that is a volcano that erupted into the lake that is there. Now, if you really want to get into it, go south of there, and there's Big Hole in the Ground. But the Big Hole in the Ground is totally forested, and you really can't see it unless you have LiDAR, which allows you laser imaging to see through the trees. But this is out there. And then if you want to continue on to Christmas Valley, There is a shield volcano, another one of these basalt volcanoes that is there, but they had a massive eruption, just flows coming out, not like a crater lake. And what happened is the whole side of the mountain just kind of collapsed and created a crack that is about 7 miles long all along the edge of this, basically at the upper part of this collapse. And that's called crack in the ground. And so next time you go up to the Christmas Valley, you can go up and see Fort Rock, hole in the ground, big hole in the ground, and crack in the ground. That's about all they have to see in that area. And then if you go up to the north end of this huge valley up there, you will come to Smith Rock. And Smith Rock is all a volcanic type of rock, but it is what we call a rhyolite. It's very, very silica rich, very light in color, as you can see. One of our best climbing areas that we have got in the state. And here's Monkey Face that is up there. And if you look closely, you can actually see some of the climbers that are climbing up on that particular area there. And that is the edge of a large supervolcano. That went off 31 million years ago. And when the hot spot that is underneath Yellowstone National Park today was traveling basically across Oregon from Portland all the way out to Burns and past Burns, and it was right in the middle, and that is the northern part of that. All right, now let's go to the most amazing volcanic eruption that did not produce any gold that we have, and that is where Oregon, Washington, and Idaho come together. Let me go to the next one. We'll come back. So right up in this area right here is where you had a lot of fissure eruptions like this, just big cracks in the ground, just like Hawaii, because that's a hot spot. And magma came up. It was very, very hot because it's coming from deep down in the earth, in the mantle. And then it flowed for many, many miles by gravity. And a lot of this actually came out and got in and up in southeastern Washington. It's up to 3 kilometers thick. It's just one lava flow on top of another. A lot of it got into the ancestral Columbia River, which has been around for 28 million years. And it pushed the water off to the side, and it flowed all the way down to the coast. And when you go up to Multnomah Falls and the gorge, well, I may show that in a second, but to the layperson, it's all black rock, fine grained. It's called basalt. To Marv Beeson, a guy who was a professor in my department, Steve here, one of our star students at Portland State, knows Marv very, very well. He divided it into all of these different flows. To me, an engineering geologist said, whoa, that's just basalt. But to Marv, they're all different. And you see one flow on top of another on top of another. One of the greatest volcanic eruptions in the world that occurred here between 15 and 18 million years ago. Any gold? No gold, but lots of lava. And some of those flows went all the way out to the coast, all of the headlands, Cascade Head, Tillamook Head, Cape Lookout, Uquina Head here. All of those are basalt flows that came all the way across the state, 400 miles across the state and out into the ocean. And there are places along the coast, hey, this is volcanic rock. And we live on a volcano. No, you don't live on a volcano. The volcanic vent was 400 miles away, but the volcanic flow came down here. Even Haystack Rock, our most famous, one of our most famous sites in the state of Oregon, is part of one of these flows that came all the way across the state and solidified in the muds off of the coast. So back to this map that I showed you earlier about this is where all of the magma was coming out right here. But the hot spot was actually down here. And this was an arm that went up there, and so the majority of the basalt that was coming up here. That arm shut off about 15 million years ago. But then it continued erupting down here. And then as North America went over this, what happened was it continued to have further eruptions, and all of the basalt that is in the Snake River floodplain all the way up here, it gets 10,876,54321 million years old. And then right now it is right under here. What's right there? Well, that's Yellowstone National Park. And this is the edge of the old continent before all of the accreted terrain. And the crust is very, very thick, over 70 kilometers thick. And so that magma that is coming out of this hotspot has to go through all this silica quartz-rich rock to the surface, and as it picks it up, when it gets to the top, it's very explosive. The more silica, the more explosive. And so Yellowstone National Park went off 2 million years ago, 1.2 million years ago, 600,000 years ago. So about every 600,000 years, huge supervolcano, just like the one that I talked about that was found up in Smith Rock. And so when was the last time it went off? 600,000 years ago. And it's every 600,000 years. If you haven't been to Yellowstone, I encourage you to do that because it may go off in our lifetime. And they are studying it there. And how do we put all of this together? How do we know that the hotspot, we should find remnants all the way out here, but we don't. Where are those remnants? Where the hotspot was before? They're all up here. Why? Because use of GPS units all over the Pacific Northwest, we have found that the whole Pacific Northwest is rotating. And the reason is the San Andreas Fault off of the coast is coming out like this, and it's tweaking the Pacific Northwest. And so if the one of the Fuca plates coming underneath, San Andreas is coming out like this, and it's called the Mendocino Fault, and then is causing the whole Pacific Northwest to rotate. And so the hotspot that used to be down here is up here and just outside of Lake Oswego. If you go up to Lewis and Clark College, the oldest rocks that you have in the city of Portland, Elk Rock Island down there, those are 48 million year old rocks, and those are the oldest rocks. That is the old hotspot that is now underneath Yellowstone National Park. And so all of these things are just starting to fall into place, and it's very exciting for us here. Let's talk a little bit about the Cascades. And so the Cascades are different types of volcanoes, and these are andesitic composite volcanoes. And actually, from the eruptions, you don't get any gold, copper, lead, and zinc. But sometimes you get hydrothermal waters that are coming out on the sides, and they will have deposits that are from there. And so we do have a few gold, copper, lead, and zinc mining operations that have occurred in the Cascades in the last 100, 150 years. But let me just show you a little bit and look at the activity of the volcanoes here. The last 4,000 years, Mount Hood gone off twice. Jefferson has not gone off at all. Then Sisters, 4 times. Newberry, a couple times. Crater Lake, well, that was 7,700 years ago, and it's so big it didn't have to have another eruption since that time. And then you get down to California, a lot more active down in that particular area. But here is our volcano that we see from Portland in Oregon, Mount Hood, absolutely beautiful. This is actually from the Hood River Valley. But when you fly over it, we have 7 or 8 major glaciers that are up there. Now, those glaciers are all shrinking. Why? Because the climate's warming up. And they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But they still, like the White River area going off of the southeast part of the mountains, they still sometimes produce some incredible what we call debris flows that are coming off of those. We go further on south, the Gentle Giant, Mount Jefferson, has not gone off in the last 10,000 years, but it has had a very good eruptive history in the past. We go further on south to the Three Sisters. Looking back up on the top, you can see Mount Jefferson there, and the cut off, and the very, very top, you've got Mount Hood, and then also Rainier. And so this area also not a good area for gold, copper, lead, and zinc, but these are active volcanoes, South Sister especially. And in fact, there's South Sister there, just to the southwest of there are these deposits here, 2,000 years old. That and the obsidian flow that I showed you are the last 2 volcanic eruptions in the state of Oregon that we have got here. And right now, it is the bulge is going up. Now, it's only going up 1 inch a year, so it's not a really fast one. But we're keeping an eye on it. The question is it going to be an andesitic volcano, which is a little more violent, or is it going to be an oozer, like a basalt volcano that's coming out? We don't know right now. And then we have older volcanoes that are up here. We got Mount Washington here, Three-Fingered Jack off in the distance. Those are 5 million year old volcanoes, but the glaciers have kind of eaten into them, and they have not been. But this is a caldera. This is our national park. And it erupted 7,700 calendar years ago. Little cinder cone, Wizard Island, that is found in the middle of it. This is what it looked like beforehand. It was over 12,000 foot high volcano, huge glaciers coming off of it on all sides. And then it had so much magma coming out of it because it was so silica rich in the magma chamber that the whole thing just fell into it, creating a large crater that is called the caldera. And then it got filled up with water. And so it's the deepest lake in North America and the clearest lake in North America. And we go further on south to Mount Thielsen. A volcano hasn't gone off in a long time. The glaciers have carved into it. And it's very, very pointed as a classic example of a horn. And then we go up to the Columbia Gorge, which I've been studying for many, many years, and especially with the Missoula floods and incredible history. You got Crown Point that is out there. Oregon side is all straight up and down. That's why we have all of the waterfalls, Multnomah Falls, etc. The Washington side, poor Washingtonians, they're deprived. They just have landslide after landslide after landslide. They don't have waterfalls on there, and so they got to come over to our side to see the other. But then you go out to Troutdale, and there's a big flat area out here right where the Sandy River comes out. Why? Because the last two major eruptions, 1,500 years ago from Mount Hood, and then the one in 1781, brought all this sediment down and created this huge, huge delta that you have got out there. If you go up the gorge, you're at Crown Point looking down. I'll show you this area right here. That is a big, huge sand dune. And if you go up on I-84, you go by that, and it's all forested. You don't know that is pure solid sand. And I had students do a soil project up there, and the soils are A over sea horizon, which means very young deposition that is there. And in the wintertime, we have all the strong east winds. The water level in the river is very, very low, and it blows the sand up, and it collects in the trees. You continue up to this is in backwards, sorry. That's Lateral Falls. It should be flipped around, doesn't matter. And this is one huge valley that is completely filled up with basalt, one of those basalt flows from Eastern Oregon. And then used to be the #1 tourist attraction in Oregon and is back to it now. Spirit Mountain displaced it for a few years. Gambling casino, but then now it's back, and it's 5 lava flows, one on top of another that you have got there. Also in the gorge, you have the most studied landslide in the Pacific Northwest, the Bridge of the Gods landslide, or also called the Bonneville slide. Broke off from the mountain on the other side, came down, and that was in the year probably 1440 AD. And dammed up the whole river, created a lake all the way back past the Dalles, and then it completely killed all the trees along the edge of the river, and then the water came through, creating the Cascades of the Columbia. Lewis and Clark, when they came down, and said, why are all these trees dead? Well, it was because of this landslide that came down and dammed up this whole area. And you continue down, you have the heart of the volcano, Beacon Rock. That's the youngest volcano in our area. It's one of the boring lavas that I'll talk about just in about 2 minutes. It's 55,000 years, and you got the nice, beautiful columnar jointed basalt that is there. Oneonta Gorge, which is in the gorge, absolutely beautiful. And then also, I wanted to mention the falls that are right over here in Willamette Falls, which are the second largest waterfall volume-wise in the United States, next to Niagara Falls. Most Oregonians don't know that. And that is being developed by the tribes and also the local community for a special type of park that is there. And then I just wanted to show you in Portland, we are known as the City of Roses. We should be known as the City of Volcanoes because every little bump that you see out there is a volcano. And so if you look at a map, those are the boring lava volcanoes. Now, you say, why did geologists call them boring? Well, because nothing in geology is boring, but it was first described in Boring, Oregon, hence the name. And the first oldest volcano is just south of Oregon City, and then you work all the way up. And then Rocky Butte is the youngest in Portland, 92,000. And if you go up the gorge, Beacon Rock is 55,000, all related to this same thing. You go to Mount Tabor, and then you've got an absolutely beautiful heart of a little cinder cone that is there. That's a 201,000 years old. To end up with, I just wanted to mention the Oregon coast. And so the gorge is not a good source for gold, and the coast range is not a good source either. But we have a dynamic coast. A lot of people from Portland never make it down past Coos Bay, and gorgeous, huge landslides that brought these large blocks down. Cape Blanco. Interesting is the furthest east point or west point in the lower 48. sticking out into the ocean. Absolutely beautiful area that is down there. Here's the further extension of Cape Blanco along the coast. And then all these are old sedimentary rocks, or you go up very close to Newport, also Astoria Formation rocks, sandstones, and shales that have been uplifted. This is Devil's Punch Pole that is north there. And then you have major rivers that are coming out of this area, the Rogue River, as we talked about before. And then landslides. I love landslides. I do a lot of that work with them. The biggest landslide in the state with the greatest name, Hooskanaden, is on Highway 101. And in fact, the Highway 101 down there gets wiped out every few years. And the road where I'm taking this, they don't even bother to pave it because it keeps moving so much. And then you go down to Coos Bay. Be sure to go out to Agate State Park, which is at the edge, uplifted sedimentary rocks. They're not good source of gold, but they are absolutely beautiful. And then Heceta Head is one of these basalt flows that came across the whole state of Oregon out into the ocean. We also have a lot of sand along the coast, too, and a lot of sand dunes that are there on the coast, as you can see here. This is the South Coast Oregon Dunes, National Recreation Area down in Florence, or you go up to Pacific City, where you get the incredible longitudinal dunes that are found there, and the second haystack rock in the state of Oregon. And then we have all of these spits that are along the beach. We have 6 of them, sand spits that go north and 6 go south, and that shows you the local direction of the longshore drift that is there. What happens is you have these headlands, and all of the sand that you have on the headlands is coming out of the rivers. And it goes back and forth in between those headland areas. This is Neahkahnie Mountain that is here. You go down to Salishan, and there's the Salishan Spit that is out there. And it's telling us that the local movement of the sand is primarily in a northerly direction in that area. Also, the size of the spits originally, when the first white explorers came out here, were only 5 to 10 feet above sea level. But now you have dunes 60, 70, 80 feet high. Why? Because we imported European beach grass, the highway department, to stabilize the sand dunes, and then spread all up and down the coast. And the sand comes in and it is deposited right below it, and the plant just keeps growing up and growing up. One of the most amazing stories in Oregon history was Bay Ocean. This is the Tillamook Bay. There's the Tillamook Spit. And the Army, and so what, I would go back here. Back in 1906, in the Rose Festival, the Potter family bought up that whole spit. They divided it into 3,000 lots, and they said in a Rose Festival float, buy a piece of property. The first destination resort in Oregon is going to be called Bay Ocean. You either take the railroad down there, or you take a boat from Portland to come down there. And they had visions. Oh, they actually built the first Olympic-sized natatorium there. They had visions of a large hotel, which never got built. But in the end, what happened is 1952, the whole city fell in. It was eroded away on the spit. Why is that? The Army Corps of Engineers came in and built the North Jetty there. And it stopped the movement of sediment coming down the beach, because we did not understand at that time that the sand moves up and down the beach from year to year. And it starved the whole thing, eroded away. And then they eventually, after the whole city fell into the ocean, they built the South Jetty, and all the sand has come back, and the spit is new there today. So the Oregon beach is incredible to there. And I always love coming down to the Sandcastle projects. This one is down at Cannon Beach. Now, to end the question, the first gold rush in Oregon. Could this book have been really taking place in Oregon? The first gold rush that we had was in 1851 down in Josephine County and Josephine Creek in the Illinois Valley. So this is very close to Cave Junction. Illinois Valley is Cave Junction. And at that, remember, 1849 was the beginning of the gold rush down in California. So you had a lot of people coming west to get rich very, very fast. And then 1852 in Rich's Gulch, just outside of Jacksonville, they found gold, and that became a gold mining town too. So those are the two big ones. And where were they found? At the edge of these granite plutons, and the veins going out, and that's where the gold, copper, lead, and zinc, but primarily gold, was being found. Now, they started out with panning, and it was primarily placer mining in the streams. And then they eventually got into some of the stream deposits with big hoses, and I'll show you that in a second, that we call hydraulic mining. And then eventually in Eastern Oregon, they had dredge mining. And then they also started mining the beaches. The beaches were all very, very dark in color, but some of them had a lot of gold flakes in them and stuff like that. So a lot of beaches were removed too. And then eventually, 1870, 80, they actually had mines, lode mining, what we call there. So here is a map of Oregon showing you where did the gold mines occur. And they occurred primarily down here in the southeast Oregon. You've got a few up in the Cascades, and then over here near Baker and the Blue Mountains and the Wallowas. Those are the sites of all of the mines. So it started out just miners out there using gold pan. And then they got more advanced where they use these incredible hydraulics to spray into the alluvium that you have got there, stream deposits. And then eventually they got into lode mining where they started having tunnels and things into the side of the mountains and going down and sideways. And they found a lot of them. And so this is the area down here. There's Jacksonville, there's Grants Pass, there's Josephine County, and the area up in Illinois County over in Curry County that you've got. So that was the very first area. Then the second gold rush occurred in Eastern Oregon. And this was in Griffin Gulch. This is 1861. It was very, very close to Baker City. Again, it started out as placer mining. And then eventually they went to lode mining later on. So it was really Grant and Baker counties that had huge amounts of that. And then they really got into these incredible dredges, Sumter, which I showed you earlier. So this, to give you an idea where that is, Eastern Oregon, there's Baker City, and then Sumter Valley is over to the west there. So these red areas are really the areas where you had them. These dredges were these huge, big contraptions that semi-floated in the river, and they would just take huge amounts of gravel out, and then they would run them through the hydraulics and separate the weight. And then using a LiDAR image of the area, this is Sumter. There's the town of Sumter up there. Look at the stream valley that it was here with the dredge like this had gone through and completely gone through all of the stream deposits that were there. Also, all over the state, you had these big mills where they would separate the slag from the gold and the copper, lead, and zinc that you have got. And the third gold rush was in the Cascades, much smaller in size. So 1858 Western Cascades in Marion County, and then 1863 also in Lane County, just south of there. And those are small areas up there, and those are primarily related to small vents found on the edges of the volcanoes that you have got. So to summarize, the gold mining in Oregon from 1850s to 1965, when this basically stopped, $9 billion worth of gold in today's dollars was taken out of the ground. That was between 5.1 and 5.8 million ounces of gold. That's an awful lot of gold that came out. So this story could have taken place in the state of Oregon. Now, very little gold mining since that time. And to show you through time, the amount of gold mining in the early days, way back before 1870, and then it went along, and then just before World War II, had a whole bunch, and then basically has stopped ever since that time. I want to make a special thanks to a good friend of mine, Clark Neuendorf, who just retired from Dogami, our state geological survey. And he was the guy who put together the story of all of the gold mining in the state of Oregon. If you go to the Dogami website and you look for the mineral information layer, you can find all of this in great depth. And he is the one who put together all of this story. So this story could have occurred here in Oregon. And so, as I mentioned before, could it happen here? Yes. Southwest Oregon or Eastern Oregon, Baker City, and Sumter area. Now, the other thing I'm hoping I've tweaked you enough that you'll want to get out with that significant other in your life and say, let's go see a little bit of Oregon. See all those stories that Mother Nature is shouting out to us wherever you go, because you do have that story that is out there. And remember that Oregon rocks. And here's a picture of part of my family at sunset up at Crater Lake looking off. We have an incredible state of Oregon to go and see and look and learn from. And so thank you very much for the chance to come and talk tonight. I guess we have time for a couple of questions. Yes?
Scott, you didn't say a word about Gold Beach.
Oh, yes. And so Gold Beach down south, that was one of the first places where placer mining, they mined the beaches. And not only did they get a lot of gold, but they also had heavy metals and trace elements down there. And they still have it today. If you go look at the color of the sand down there, black. And those are heavy metals and trace elements. But there's a law in Oregon, you cannot mine the beach, because if you mine the beach, then erosion is going to be occurring further on down. And so, but in those days, we didn't understand beach processes. So that's where Gold Beach got its name. And thanks for that. I forgot about that. So yes, question back there.
You didn't talk about the Chinese mining in the Snake River.
Oh, yeah, so the Snake River on the far side. I should have. I didn't know about it. So thank you very much for mentioning that. And so those would be on the east side of the old plutons that were accreted out there in the very, very first part. So thank you. So I did not know about those. Yes.
So, silly question: how do you find a gold mine? I mean, if you grow up in California, you know the story of Sutter's Mill, and it was completely accidental. So the places that you've identified in the state seem to be very, very specific. So were they looking? Was it accidental? What were they looking for? Were there geological?
Yes, and what you do is you want to go to an area that is primarily granite parent material, but you go to the edge of the granite outcrop, because you go to the heart of a granite pluton, there's no gold, copper, lead, and zinc. What happens is it gets concentrated in veins and basically in hot water and separated off, and those go out into the cracks that are on the edges. So you always go to the edge of a large granitic pluton. If you go down into the Sierras down in California, it's granite everywhere. You aren't going to find any there, but you go to the edges of the Sierras, right where you have all of the veins. And if you find a really big vein, it's called a lode, and a really, really big one is called the mother lode. That's where you would go. So you've got to go to areas where you've got granitic plutons. So my dentist, for instance, invests in copper porphyry. And so he invests in mines. He's drilling on my teeth and asking me what's the geology of the area. And again, you go to areas where you have got these incredible granitic intrusions. So that's where you would go. You would not go to a place with basalt. You would not go to a place that has sedimentary rocks, unless maybe in the stream sediments you had some gold, copper, lead, and zinc coming from the headwaters down to that particular area. That's always a good question. I have students that, what if I drop out of school and I want to go find gold? Well, you go to the granitic areas at the edge. So good question. Yes, right there.
We were staying at Arch Cape, and I wondered what creek it is on the south, and this woman was out wading, and I went out and was washing her. She was literally panning and getting tiny, tiny little pieces of gold out of this creek, and it was washing down.
Well, that's neat. Arch Cape, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is you have to be careful, because you can get a lot of little gold flakes when you're panning for gold. They can also be weathered mica. Mica is very, very common.
And she knew the difference.
Yes, and so she knew the difference, and that's good. And that would be coming out. It's pretty rare, because the Coast Range is mostly basalt, and this is what we call Silesia. And so there isn't going to be a huge amount of gold that is going to be coming out of there, but she's having a good time. So that's good. Thank you for that story. Yes?
How did the gold get into the mantle in the first place so that it could come out into these?
Oh, I love it. So when the Earth, so the question was, how did the gold actually get into the mantle? When the Earth was formed, gravity, all these particles, there was a large dust cloud, and then gravity reinforced itself, and all these particles came closer and closer together. what happens is the greatest amount of gravity is at the center. And so the heaviest elements are all going to be going into the center. So uranium and thorium and all of the really heavy minerals are going to go right to the center of the earth, along with nickel and iron and other things like that. And they would form the core of the earth. And then when you have a lot of uranium in there, it heats it up. And so you have the outer core is liquid, the inner core is solid. And some of the gold, which is not quite as heavy as the others, is left in the mantle that is there. And then if you have magma creating that comes back up to the surface, it can bring it back up. So all of this came through, to when the earth was first formed. And then with plate tectonics, we have rearranged a lot of the plates and the minerals that we have got out there. And especially with the granite, you've got they're at the edges of that. And it's hydrothermal alteration within that will cause it to be changed. Good question. Any other questions that we have got? All right, well, it's just about 8 o'clock, so I'm going to